In what was supposed to be a special legislative session focused on consumable THC in congressional districts, Texas lawmakers are now focused on how they could have prevented the deadly floods that killed more than 100 people in Central Texas weeks earlier. This week on Inside the Investigation, KXAN's Director of Investigations and Innovation, Josh Hinkle, explains the state's missed opportunities to save lives. Welcome to Inside the Investigation. I'm your host, Kelly Wiley, and today I'm joined by the head of our investigative team, Josh. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Josh, let's jump right in. This week, lawmakers returned to the Capitol for a special session. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Texas legislature convenes every 2 years, but the governor can call what's called a special session, where lawmakers can address really only what the governor has called for them to focus on, right?
That's exactly right. And I'm going to have to refer to my notes because there is so much to focus on with this special session in such a short amount of time. 30 days is all they have to pack in a lot. But near the end of June, Governor Greg Abbott called that special session. He listed 6 bills at that time that would be up for consideration. One of those was Senate Bill 3, and that's the one we've heard so much about with regulations to consumable hemp or THC in the state. But then, as we all know, July 4th weekend came around, and that was the big flooding, especially in Kerr County. In the middle of the night, the Guadalupe River rose around 30 feet in less than a few hours. Summer camps, neighborhoods, RV parks, they were all dotted along the river in Kerr County. They were inundated with floodwaters. And all in all, 107 men, women, and children died in those flash floods across the hill country, including Kerr County and all throughout Central Texas that weekend. However, in the days that followed, local, state, and even federal officials struggled to answer questions about how prepared they were to warn people about the dangers of those flash floods. They were getting questions from all sides, really, and we've been on top of it since then. Were there sirens? Did the county issue alerts to residents in that area? Did the staffing shortages at the National Weather Service impact the accuracy of those warnings? So we were obviously there. You were there questioning Governor Abbott, but 2 days after the flash floods, he sat down for another press conference at the same question, and the same questions kept coming up again. But this time, the governor shared something new. He wanted lawmakers to focus on these very questions during the special session.
And I remember being in the room when he said that, and we were all kind of taken aback a little bit that he was jumping right there, that they were going to address it during the special session. And it's important to note that during the regular session that ended in May, lawmakers had an opportunity to at least get the ball rolling with improving emergency warning systems in areas like the Hill Country, which see regular flooding.
Yeah, and I do want to get to that, but kind of what you were talking about with your prior point, there's some important context there because the governor, after the regular session, can call as many special sessions as he wants to. I mean, I've been here for 16 years, and there has been some 2-year periods where we've had 3 up to 4 special legislative sessions. And sometimes they come back to back to back right after the regular session, but they can only last 30 days. So like you said, we were kind of taken aback because people were suspecting he was going to add the flood response to a special session, but maybe just not this immediate one because it's only a couple of weeks since the flooding event happened, and there was already so much on the call. Like we said, those 6 bills, and the list of bills keeps adding up since then. So the bill that you mentioned from the regular session, that was House Bill 13. It was proposed by several lawmakers, including Democratic Representative Joe Moody out of El Paso. And this bill would have helped governments acquire emergency communications equipment such like sirens, which we've covered a lot of since the flood. Had it passed, it would have created a council to operate a grant program for that purpose. It would have made a statewide strategic plan that included the use of outdoor warning signs as well. And the council would have to have also been asked to develop and implement as advisable an emergency alert system and incorporate it as necessary communications technologies into the emergency communications network of this state. It's a lot of, bill jargon there, but that's specifically what it would do. It passed the House, the entire House, but it stalled when it got to the Senate Finance Committee. So it didn't move forward in the legislative session that ended in May. It was never brought up for a hearing on the Senate side. It did, however, like I said, pass the full House pretty overwhelmingly, 129 to 18 on final reading, which is pretty good. But among those voting against the measure at the time, back in the spring, was Representative Wes Verdell, a Republican of Brady, which is in Kerr County. He represents Kerr County in the legislature. He is now sitting on this special flood committee that has been called for the special session, and it's discussing what went wrong here and what could be improved. We got our first look at that this week when our colleague Matt Grant had the opportunity to speak with him. Let's listen to what Wes Verdell had to say.
Sometimes government actually has the problem of overreacting to a situation, so I think it's good to have thorough discussions, and even if it takes a little while for that to happen.
And I found that to be an interesting response, especially considering there were people, just all that's happened. But he did express to Matt also that he's not even sure how effective a warning system would have been. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. But Wednesday, you mentioned we had the first hearing on all of this. How did that go?
Well, a lot of things happened. It was a really long committee hearing, several witnesses, several aspects they wanted to get through. I think it lasted close to 12 hours. Outside the chamber, there was obviously a lot of anger. Many residents from the Kerr County area and other Central Texas communities that were affected by the flooding, they showed up. We heard from the Texas Division of Emergency Management, Chief Nim Kidd, who told lawmakers the state knew that they needed extra resources over the 4th of July weekend, specifically within that area of concern in and around Kerr County. He reiterated that he's something he said in several press conferences now, that the severity of the storm caught his team and really everyone by surprise. And that's what we've heard from many leaders. They did not expect this amount of rainfall in such a stationary position. The discussion also touched on initial confusion that was happening, at least in the Kerr County area. It highlighted the Kerr County dispatch audio that we've previously obtained with our investigative team. That audio is of a Kerr County sheriff dispatcher and a firefighter when the firefighter asks the dispatcher at 4:22 a.m., which was hours after the National Weather Service flash flood warning went out, 4:22 a.m. then, that volunteer firefighter was asking the dispatcher, is there any way we can send a code red out to our Hunt residents, asking them to find higher ground or stay home? So it's really the first time we have documented proof that there was a request for an alert. If you don't know what code red is the system that Kerr County and many other agencies throughout the state have signed up with to notify your cell phones when there is an emergency happening like a flood. It's tied to another system, iPause, that allows the county and whatever agencies are contracted with that to alert cell phones in the geographic area. So if you're like a tourist or a camper who doesn't live in Kerr County and hasn't subscribed to the code red, you would still get those alerts. And so part of the investigation we've done is just really the timing of that and whether Kerr County officials did what they should have done during those crucial hours. Nim Kidd did admit that the state needs better warning systems, but he also said he's not sure at this point what this looks like. Let's listen to Joe Moody, who we talked about a little bit earlier. He had something to say on this point.
We are better than this. We've lost a lot in this, and it could have been better both before, during, and after. And we know that. And that's not a blame game. No, that's accountability.
So a lot of emotion from lawmakers that we heard yesterday. There was some finger pointing, some questions about which leaders should have done what. We did mention that there were a lot of residents that showed up that were angry outside the hearing, which was packed. We had to get there very early in the morning to make sure that our crew had a place to set up to capture all of that. There was no public testimony, though, at this hearing, but this is not going to be the only time that this committee obviously meets. The Joint Committee, which has House members and Senate members on it, will reconvene next Thursday on July 31st in Kerrville. So they're taking this on the road, on location, to hear directly from residents and officials impacted by the flooding there in Kerr County.
And that's going to be, I think, very interesting to see what they have to say. It's just, like you mentioned earlier, it's not even been a month. So there's a lot there to process. I want to go back to what you were really talking about at the top of this, which is that really they had these 6 bills that they wanted to address, or that the governor wanted them to address. They have added 4 topics hitting on what happened on Kerr, but they've also added even more unrelated matters that they want to touch on. And again, they only have so much time. Break down what all is going to happen during this special session, or at least what all they hope to address during this special session.
Yeah, so a reminder, the governor is the one that has the power to put something on the special session call. So only bills that are germane to the topics that he has said can be considered during this 30-day period can actually be considered. You can file whatever, but it may just not advance and may not go forward with any committees, and he definitely wouldn't sign it if it wasn't germane to whatever he wants. The good thing about a special session is that things pop up after the regular session, obviously, because the legislature doesn't reconvene again until January of 2027 for another regular session. That's after another election. We'll have new lawmakers in there. So that's a year and a half that essentially they could be not doing too much. There's obviously a lot of stuff that happens, like interim committee hearings, but the governor in his power has the special session power. So he can call these 30-day special sessions. And typically they're very targeted on, just a couple of topics, or they have like a specific subject that they're looking at. So a lot of people were kind of, as we said earlier, taken aback that he would put the flooding issues into this special session, which already had so many issues that were frankly very controversial, and some things that ran out of time because they were so controversial in the regular session. So putting all of these flood measures here is a lot to put on lawmakers, to expect them to actually make progress and get something passed, something meaningful passed that will help people in this 30-day period. But yes, so there are other priorities. What was a list of 6 bills the governor wanted lawmakers to focus on has now turned into 18 topics. As it relates to what happened in Kerr, there are 4 items that we're talking about here. Legislation to improve early warning systems, legislation to evaluate and streamline rules and regulations to speed preparedness for and recovery from natural disasters, and legislation to strengthen emergency communications and other response infrastructure. There's also a bill that would provide relief funding for the Hill Country, including matching funds from FEMA. So that's a lot.
Yeah. And let's also talk about those other priorities that got added on. Start from the top. What do we have?
Yes. Okay. For your running list, we have cutting property taxes.
Okay.
Not an easy topic. Eliminating the STAR test.
Not an easy topic, I can say, as the education reporter in the room.
Oh, yeah. And it's a long-standing issue. Legislation protecting women's privacy in sex-segregated spaces, typically kind of known as the trans bathroom bill, which has always been one of the most controversial bills in recent legislative sessions. Addressing title theft and deed fraud. Attorney General election power, and protecting unborn children. So there is a lot to do in this 30-day special session, obviously.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, these are all things we've seen before that have been, like you said, time has run out in other regular sessions, and because they've been hard to pass, hard to come to a consensus on. Josh, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being our resident expert on all things legislative. It always comes in handy for us. For those of you listening, we release a new episode every Friday morning on the KXAN Investigates podcast. You can also watch us on demand on our KXAN Plus app starting at 1 p.m. on Fridays. You can find the KXAN Plus app on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. I'm Kelly Wiley. We'll see you next time.